College basketball season tips off in 10 weeks, so why the heck are we still waiting for a waiver for Tyon Grant-Foster?
You are Locked On Zags, your daily podcast on the Gonzaga Bulldogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, y'all? Welcome into the Locked On Zags podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host and longtime Gonzaga podcaster, Andy Patton, here to bring you news and updates on all things Zag athletics. Well, folks, UCLA's non-conference schedule is extremely cowardly, and we're going to talk about that, plus some dormant non-conference matchups we'd love to see revived for Gonzaga. We're going to get to all of that, and we're also going to talk Tyon Grant-Foster. Why on earth we do not have an update on whether he is going to suit up for Gonzaga this upcoming season. All of that on a jam-packed episode today. Quickly, before we get into that, though, we did get an announcement, sort of an announcement, not from Gonzaga, mind you, but Western Oregon, a Division II school in just outside of Salem, Oregon, released their schedule this year, and it does include an exhibition game against Gonzaga on October 27th at the McCarthy Athletic Center. So we now know one of Gonzaga's likely two exhibition games this year. We're not going to spend a ton of time on this. Western Oregon is a D2 school in the GNAC. They went 5-23 last year. This is your typical your typical exhibition game against a non-D1 opponent, tune-up type game 6 days before Gonzaga starts the season against Texas Southern. Not a surprise to see a game like this added to the schedule, but at least we are seeing the schedule start to come together, even if the majority of the updates we've gotten recently about Gonzaga's schedule have been other teams updating their schedule as opposed to Gonzaga actually letting us know who they're going to be playing. We'll talk some more scheduling stuff later in the show, but I wanted to lead the show with the story that we've been just waiting for an update on for a long time. In fact, almost exactly a month ago on Locked On Zags, we led the show with a mailbag question that was basically, what's the deal with Tyon Grant-Foster? And I really wish that this update 1 month later had more additional information. We don't really. We have some additional information with regards to other decisions the NCAA has made in that amount of time, but we have no update on what is going on with Tyon Grant-Foster. Grant-Foster committed to Gonzaga out of the transfer portal on May 28th. So it was early in the summer, and we are still now late in the summer, less than a month until summer is over, and nothing has really changed for Tyon Grant-Foster. Again, he committed to Gonzaga in May. He is waiting on a waiver from the NCAA to grant him an additional year of eligibility to play for the Zags this upcoming 25-26 season. Because he does not have that waiver approved, Grant-Foster is unable to participate in any activities with Gonzaga. That is part of the reason that this is so frustrating, is that Tyon Grant-Foster he's working out. If you follow him on social media, he's actively working out in Kansas City, where he's from. You've seen him working out on Grand Canyon's campus. He's been around, and he's been, getting his shots up, getting his game going, but he is unable to work with the coaching staff, work with his new teammates, work within the system, and get to know his bearings in Spokane, his teammates, his coaches, the training staff, all of those things that are really helpful to have kind of ironed out and situated before the college basketball season gets underway. And that's what makes this so frustrating. It's not that Grant-Foster is not, is going to be like super rusty or out of shape or anything like that. He's working on his game, but he won't be up to date, as familiar with his teammates and as familiar with what Mark Few and the staff are asking him to do, because he's not getting the opportunity to be around his teammates through no fault of his own. And that is challenging. If this were a really, and to be clear, it is a bit of a tricky situation, but if this were like a Hail Mary prayer of a waiver type situation, I think I could understand why maybe the NCAA is not rushing to get a decision out. But this feels like a decision that shouldn't be that difficult for the NCAA to reach at least some kind of verdict on. And yet here we are months and months later without any clarity from the NCAA, without any clarity from Gonzaga, without any clarity from Grant-Foster about whether he's going to be playing for Gonzaga this year. As a reminder about Grant-Foster's history in college basketball, he began as a junior college player at Indian Hills Junior College in 2 seasons at the junior college level, in the 2018-19 season, and then again in 2019-20. Yes, that was a long time ago. And that is a fair and compelling argument for why Grant-Foster should not get eligibility this year, because he's been playing college basketball for a long time. But hear me out on the rest of the story. 2 years in junior college in 1819 and 1920. Then he made it up to the Division I level at Kansas for the 2020-21 season, where he played 22 games. However, the 2020-21 season was the year of COVID eligibility being granted to every player who played in that year. So the NCAA cannot and will not count that year against Tyon Grant-Foster's eligibility. It would be an absolute circus if they attempted in any way, shape, or form to do that, considering they were very clear about a blanket waiver for every player who participated in D1 basketball that season. From there, Grant-Foster transferred to DePaul, and in the first half of his first game at DePaul, Grant-Foster collapsed. It was actually at halftime. He collapsed in the locker room, had to end up having heart surgery, ended up having multiple heart surgeries, missed the entire rest of that season at DePaul, as well as the entire next season. So in the 2021-22 season, and then the 2022-23 seasons combined, Grant-Foster played half a basketball game. That's it. He resurfaced again nearly 2 years later at Grand Canyon in the 23-24 season. That was his first full healthy season. He played 34 games. He scored 20 points per game. He was the WAC player of the year. He was one of the most dynamic and kind of feel-good stories in all of college basketball, coming back from that heart surgery to not only play D1 basketball again, but at a super high level. It was a phenomenal story. Instead of going to the NBA draft, which many folks thought that he would do, he opted to return to Grand Canyon for another year last year in 24-25. Dealt with some ankle injuries, only played 26 games. His performance dipped a little bit, but regardless, that puts us in a situation where we are now, where Grant-Foster transferred after that season and ended up committing to Gonzaga. So if you do not count the year at Kansas against him, which again, because it was COVID, you cannot, presumably you do not count a half a basketball game played at DePaul against him or the entire season he missed. So you have 2 years at Grand Canyon, and then you have the 2 years at the junior college level. However, the NCAA has determined that if you played junior college basketball that you are then given an extra year of eligibility. This was a ruling from the Diego Pavia lawsuit. He was the quarterback at Vanderbilt who sued the NCAA, saying his junior college year should not count against his eligibility. And the NCAA said, okay, we're not sure how we're going to rule on this, but we are going to give you an extra year. And they made a blanket statement that anybody who played junior college will get an additional year of eligibility after the 25-26 season, so into this upcoming season. So in my mind, I'm looking at a player who, yes, he's been playing college basketball since 2018, but due to injuries, due to the COVID eligibility season, due to his time at the junior college level, I do not see any real reason why the NCAA would deny this waiver. And it would be inconsistent with previous rulings that they have given out. Now, the NCAA is not a paragon of consistency. They never have been. It is a huge complaint that everybody has at every level in any sport, is that there is a lack of consistency from the NCAA. The NCAA has indicated that they are trying to take very seriously the 5-year window. If that is their reasoning for potentially denying Tyon Grant-Foster, it falls pretty flat compared to other situations in college basketball that they ruled on this offseason. Tyon Grant-Foster has played 83 games at the Division I level. Yes, he played 2 years at junior college, and I'm not saying that doesn't count at all, but he's played 83 games at the D1 level. And there is, at this point, the possibility that he will not have his waiver approved. Devin Cambridge, who transferred to Oregon this offseason, was given a 7th year of eligibility this upcoming season. Devin Cambridge played 141 career games at the Division I level. That's 60 more games than Tyon Grant-Foster has played. Chad Baker-Mazara will be 27 when this upcoming college basketball season ends. 27 years old. He's at USC this year. He played 119 games at the Division I level and also played junior college basketball. So 40 more games at the D1 level than Grant-Foster, while also having played junior college basketball. And he did not have any issues getting eligibility for this upcoming season. Chance Moore at West Virginia was given a waiver of approval this year for what will be his 5th season. He's played 99 career games at the Division I level. Once again, Grant-Foster, 83 games. I am really struggling to see how it would be a justifiable decision by the NCAA to not give Grant-Foster another year of eligibility for Gonzaga this upcoming season. And if it is denied, the Zags will appeal, and they will appeal guns fully ablazing, and they will do whatever they can to get the NCAA to rehear the case and potentially change their decision. This has worked in the past. Louisville center Ali Khalifa was incredibly inexplicably denied a waiver this year, despite having only played 3 years, because he redshirted as a freshman, and then he redshirted last year at Louisville, and the NCAA said, well, you spent 5 years in college basketball, even if you redshirted 2 of those years, sorry, we're denying your waiver. And Louisville came out firing. They threatened to get lawsuits involved. They threatened to get lawyers, and the NCAA very quickly backed down, because that's what they do, and allowed Ali Khalifa to be eligible for this upcoming season. So I think even if the initial news, which we just have not gotten yet, is that Grant-Foster's waiver is denied, the Zags will appeal that, and they will try to fight it tooth and nail to get him on the floor for this upcoming season. But it is incredibly unfortunate that even in the very best case scenario, which is that while I am recording this podcast right now, the NCAA is announcing that Grant-Foster will get a waiver for this season. Even in that best case scenario, he will have missed so much valuable time that he could have spent with this team preparing for the upcoming season. And it will have been for virtually no reason other than slowness by the NCAA. And not just like, oh, it took him a couple of weeks. It's been months at this point that we have not heard an update on a situation that I cannot imagine what more they need, what other information that's not publicly available or that they haven't gotten from the associated parties to make a decision here. It is incredibly frustrating, more than anything else for Grant-Foster, who just would like to know if he's going to be playing college basketball this year, or if he needs to start looking for a professional job. It's got to be frustrating for the coaching staff to not know whether a player who's ostensibly a huge part of the team this year is going to be able to play or not. It's a very frustrating situation all around. I wish I had more news for you. I wish I had any information for you, but I just want to highlight kind of what we've seen from the NCAA, why there might be a delay here, and hopefully get some answers in the not too distant future so the Zags can finally get their team together here with 10 weeks until the season begins. Well, folks, moving back to scheduling, Gonzaga versus Oregon finally happening. We know that. We talked about that. Who else have we been desperately wanting to see Gonzaga square off against in the non-conference slate? We're going to talk about some other teams that Gonzaga should play. We'd like to see them play, some suggestions from some listeners, all that coming up here in just a second. But first, folks, today, August 26th, is officially FanDuel Futures Day, a brand new holiday for football fans who live for bold predictions and preseason hunches. For just 24 hours, FanDuel is giving you the deals on NFL season predictions. Whether you're calling your MVP, eyeing a long shot division winner, or ready to crown your Super Bowl champion before week 1 even kicks off, this is your moment. So take a flyer on the MVP race. For me, I'm going with Joe Burrow. I think it is Joe Burrow's year for the Cincinnati Bengals. He's got the third best odds at plus 600. I don't have the Bengals winning it all, though. Give me the Detroit Lions. My dad's team growing up, they came so close not that long ago. It would be so much fun to see a team that has been consistently in turmoil finally do it. The Lions are at plus 1,000. Or you can parlay those picks, or you can parlay all of your division winner dark horses. So, folks, visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your futures bet now, because Futures Day is one day and one day only. FanDuel, play your game. All right, folks, segment 2, still Andy Patton, still Locked On Zags podcast. We're going to talk some scheduling stuff here for the Zags, but before we do that, I do have an important request for you all. Locked On would like to hear from you. We've put together a survey to learn more about our listeners and find out ways to make your favorite podcasts even better. This is your chance to tell us what you like, what you don't like, and answer some questions about our advertising. Go to lockedonpodcast.com/survey to get started. Everybody who completes a survey will be entered for a chance to win one of 10 $100 Amazon gift cards. Again, lockedonpodcast.com/survey. You can also find the link in the show notes, or if you're watching on YouTube, you'll see a QR code. You can scan that as well. Folks, thank you so much for helping us out with that matter. All right, folks, continuing the conversation here. We talked about this when Gonzaga versus Oregon was announced. That game, by the way, will be December 21st. at the Moda Center in Portland, Oregon. It is just the third time that these two teams have played each other since Mark Few took over as the head coach in 1999, and it is really the only time they've ever willingly scheduled each other. Mark Few, of course, an alumni from the University of Oregon that has played a part in these two teams not having played each other. The last time they played each other in the mainland United States was 1984. They played once in 1999 in Maui as part of the Maui Invitational, and they played in the Bahamas in 2019 as part of the Battle for Atlantis, an epic overtime win for the Zags in that one, but a game that has not been on the schedule for the most part. And Oregon's been up and down. They've had some very, very successful kind of eras in that time. In fact, in the early 2000s, they were very good with Luke Ridnour and Fred Jones. And that was one of the first college basketball teams that I fell in love with before I became affiliated with Gonzaga. So I know that this team is there could have been a lot of great battles throughout the history, but they just never really managed to make it happen. And now we're going to see that on December 21st. And it prompted me on the Locked On Zags YouTube channel to ask people, who else do you want to see? And I kind of joked about it because I was like, it's Arizona, right? Like the answer to this question is Arizona. That's the main non-conference team that Gonzaga fans most want to see Gonzaga square off against. And yes, that is, I think, the overwhelming answer. And we're going to talk about them. But there's a couple other teams that came up in some of these conversations and some of the comments. And I thought it might be fun to kind of highlight a few of those teams here as we look at some dream scenarios for Gonzaga's non-conference slate. I don't think any of these games are going to happen this year, mind you, but still some fun teams to talk about. Number one is, of course, as we alluded to already, Arizona. Zags are 4-5 against Arizona dating back to November of 2000. The Zags won the last 3 games in this non-conference scheduling series. They beat them in 2016 and 2018 and again in 2019, and the series stopped after that, not because Gonzaga had won 3 games in a row, but because Sean Miller left Arizona to go take the job at Xavier and was replaced by longtime Gonzaga assistant, at that time associate head coach Tommy Lloyd. Tommy Lloyd spent 20 years working with Mark Few, and so it was understandable in the immediate aftermath of him moving to Arizona why these two teams would not play each other. There was also some player overlap. Umar Ballo transferred from Gonzaga to Arizona. Matthew Lang, a walk-on, transferred to Arizona. Rem Bakamis and Shemet Karnowski worked for Arizona. Rem now works at Texas Tech, but Shem is still at Arizona. Lloyd is, of course, still at Arizona. So it's understandable that those two teams have not played each other. They almost did last year, not by choice, mind you, but because they were both part of the Battle for Atlantis, and had the championship gone as expected, it would have been a Gonzaga versus Arizona matchup. But Gonzaga lost their first game to West Virginia. Arizona lost a game in that tournament as well, and it ended up being, I think, Louisville versus Oklahoma. Was the actual championship in that Atlantis last year. But we'll see if these two teams do eventually schedule each other again. But I wouldn't bank on it happening anytime super soon, in part because in the past, Gonzaga has been very, very hesitant to schedule other teams that are coached by former Gonzaga assistant coaches. Notably, one of the other schools on this list here, which is Boise State. And I included Boise State on this list, even though we know that this is about to change, of course, with Gonzaga joining the Pac-12 in the 26-27 season. Gonzaga will start playing Boise State regularly at that time. But these two coaches, Leon Rice, longtime assistant coach, they're very, very close friends. They were colleagues for over a decade, and they have said straight up, we do not want to play each other. Like, this is not something that we really are looking forward to or want to happen. And obviously, again, that's going to change, but that kind of points to the likelihood that this Gonzaga versus Arizona freeze out that we've been dealing with for the last half decade may continue for a while, barring them somehow meeting up in an MTE like we almost had this past season. For the record, Gonzaga and Boise State have actually played each other twice since Mark Few took over as the head coach, and they have not played each other since December of 2000. So it has been a quarter century since these two schools that are only about 7 hours apart driving-wise have even faced each other. A couple other teams that people mentioned here would be BYU and Memphis. We'll start with BYU. The Zags are overwhelmingly dominant against BYU dating back to 2011, which is when Gonzaga's records go back to on their website. Zags 24-7 against BYU in that time. They won their last 7 against them, including 13 of their last 14 against BYU. But BYU gave them some really good games. Gonzaga's only loss in the 2016-17 season before they lost to North Carolina in the championship was to BYU on senior night in Spokane. They had some really great games. Julian Strother hit that epic game winner against BYU in 2023 in the regular season. BYU nearly took down an undefeated Gonzaga team in 2021 before Jalen Suggs had some heroics against that team. This was a really fun conference rivalry. And since BYU has moved to the Big 12, they have not scheduled Gonzaga. Mark Pope was the coach for 1 year, and then he took that job at Kentucky. Kevin Young takes over at BYU. And I really want to see this game, not just because of the history, the rivalry, the loudness of the Marriott Center, and of course the Kennel, but because Kevin Young, the new head coach at BYU, is an NBA assistant coach, and he runs an NBA-style offense. And I think these two teams would make for a really fun game of basketball. So I'm hoping we will see this game back on the schedule in the not too distant future. And then last but not least, Memphis. Not as much history between these two teams. The Zags are 3-6 against Memphis dating back to December of 2005. Gonzaga actually lost 6 of the first 7 games they played against Memphis, but then won their 2 most recent games, the last one being in the 2022 NCAA tournament, a game where Gonzaga was a 1 seed and Memphis was, I think, an 8 or a 9 seed, and Gonzaga was down 10 at halftime in that game, but then Drew Timme scored, I think, 11 points in the first 4 minutes of the second half, and then Andrew Nembhard just ran all over them for the rest of the second half. Really fun game. Chet Holmgren took it to Jalen Duren in that game. Drew Timme was awesome. Andrew Nembhard was awesome. It was a fantastic game. The last good game Gonzaga played that year after they lost to Arkansas in their following game after that. But this is a rivalry that used to exist because of Gonzaga's Mark Few's relationship with John Calipari. When he was the head coach at Memphis, they would play each other often in those mid-season non-conference games at the Spokane Arena, which was really cool to see those games happen. So yeah, I would love to see Memphis back on the schedule. Obviously, Memphis has been rumored to be part of the Pac-12's plans, although a lot of the conversation now is around Memphis being a potential football-only member of the Pac-12, which would be a bit of a devastating blow to Gonzaga. Hopefully they would get a scheduling agreement out of the deal there. But it's definitely a team to keep an eye on, as Memphis and Gonzaga have been historically 2 of the very best non-power conference programs in all of college basketball. So we got Oregon back on the schedule. Now we'll see if we ever get, or when we ever get, Arizona, BYU, Memphis, Boise State. There's a few others. Obviously, it hasn't been very long since Gonzaga played Washington, but we're waiting to see if Danny Sprinkle's ever going to be willing to play that game. So far, does not look like that is the case. And then some local teams, Seattle U is going to be rectified this year. Those 2 teams will play each other now as they're members of the WCC. Eastern Washington's probably not going to happen until Dan Munson leaves at Eastern Washington, so I wouldn't expect to see that game anytime super soon. I'm sure there's others that you have out there. If there's a team that you have been waiting to see Gonzaga play for a long time that they haven't, let me know. I'd love to hear. I think that's always fun to kind of talk about scheduling and some of those games that would be a lot of fun to see that we just don't get to see for one reason or another. Well, after a traumatic amount of schedule for Mick Cronin in the Big Ten last year at UCLA, his only non-conference trip this year outside of the state of California is when he comes up to Seattle to take on Gonzaga at Climate Pledge Arena. Sure feels like a pretty cowardly non-con to me. We're going to talk more about it in just a second. But first, guys, you've probably heard of Viagra or Cialis. Maybe you've even tried them. But if you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, it's time to meet Rugiet Ready. Rugiet Ready is a next-generation prescription treatment designed to amplify arousal in the brain and boost blood flow. Unlike the usual pills that can take hours, Rugiet's 3-in-1 formula dissolves under your tongue and kicks in fast, on average in 15 minutes. Effects can last up to 36 hours, so you can stay confident and in control when the moment is right. And if traditional options haven't worked, Rugiet might be the answer. Over 150,000 men have already made the switch. And Rugiet's completely online. It connects you with a board-certified doctor and ships your treatments discreetly to your door. So head to Rugiet.com/LockedOnCollege and use code LockedOnCollege to get 15% off today. That's Rugiet, RUGIET.com/LockedOnCollege, using promo code LockedOnCollege for 15% off. Individual results may vary with prescription treatment. Compounded drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law, but are not FDA approved and do not undergo FDA safety, effectiveness, or manufacturing review. Please visit the Rugiet website for full safety information. All right, folks, segment 3, still Andy Patton, still Locked On Zags podcast. We're closing out the show Continuing our conversation about scheduling, because it was revealed on Monday, UCLA's non-conference schedule for the upcoming 2025-26 season. And folks, this is something else. We've been talking about specifically Big 12 schools, which are very notorious for playing kind of cupcakey non-conference schedules. But this schedule from UCLA, well, it's not like super cupcakey. They have some tough games on the schedule. This is a team that very clearly didn't want to go pretty much anywhere until they got into conference play. I'm going to rattle off. It's an 11-game schedule because the Big Ten is 20 conference games nowadays. So 11 non-conference games for UCLA. I'm going to rattle them off here quickly. They open against Eastern Washington, then they got Pepperdine, West Georgia, and Arizona. The Arizona game is at the Intuit Dome. Sacramento State is next, then Presbyterian. Then they take on Cal on November 25th. That game is at the Chase Center. And then their next game on the schedule is December 13th. That is the game against Gonzaga at the Climate Pledge Arena. Then after that, they have 3 home games against Arizona State, UC Riverside, and Cal Poly. So again, it's not a great schedule, even competition-wise, but you got Arizona, Gonzaga, Cal, Arizona State. That's decent quality of opponents there, but UCLA is not playing any road games. Not a single true road game on this schedule. And in fact, their neutral site games, they're playing Arizona at the Intuit Dome, which is 14 miles away from UCLA's campus. And they're playing Cal at the Chase Center, which is definitely, closer to Berkeley than it is to UCLA. I would be fairly surprised if there was more Cal fans at the Chase Center than UCLA fans, but I will still at least, I suppose, give it to UCLA that they are playing a team at a arena that is closer to them than it is to UCLA. But Cal at the Chase Center being your toughest road game outside of Gonzaga at the Climate Pledge Arena is pretty weak. Now, again, 11 games, 8 home games, 3 neutral site games, none of them being particularly challenging for UCLA, again, outside of the one game against Gonzaga. Also, it was notable, and I think I know the answer to this, so I'm not going to say what I was planning to say, which is there are 17 days between Gonzaga's game against Cal on November 25th and their game against Gonzaga on December 13th. Now, from my understanding, the Big Ten schedule has not come out yet. I know that. It has not come out yet, and in the past, there have usually been 1 or 2 Big Ten games that happen in early December, and then the rest of the schedule starts after Christmas. So it's possible that UCLA has left that huge 17-day gap with the expectation that there will be 1 or 2 Big Ten games in that schedule. Because otherwise, that's a huge gap in your non-conference schedule, and it seems a little unnecessary. My joke was going to be something along the lines of, is Mick Cronin planning to hitchhike from Southern California to Seattle for that game? But I do think that they are leaving some dates open for their schedule to be accommodated by the Big Ten. But this is pretty weak. And it's notable that UCLA bowed out of the CBS Champions Classic, which is a long-standing event that has taken place for over a decade now. It's between it's Michigan State, UCLA, Kentucky, and North Carolina have been the 4 teams historically in this event. And UCLA said, no, we're good, because they're in New York this year. They were in Atlanta last year, I think. And UCLA said, no, we don't really want to do that anymore. So I think they've added Louisville to the event instead of UCLA. But like UCLA actively made decisions to avoid traveling out of the state of California. Like, it was very clear that this was an intentional decision by Mick Cronin and their staff to play as few road games or travel as few miles as possible in the non-conference. And I know the reasoning. The reasoning is because the entire Big Ten conference is spread out over the continental United States, and Mick Cronin whined and complained about it a whole bunch last year. Mick Cronin's infamous quote early in non-conference play or in conference play last year was, quote, "We've seen the Statue of Liberty twice in the last 3 weeks." I can understand why a coach coaching in Los Angeles doesn't like seeing the Statue of Liberty twice in 3 weeks. Too bad. I know it wasn't Mick Cronin's decision for UCLA to join the Big Ten. I understand that he did not champion or shepherd that move for the team, and that he may not have even wanted to do it. I don't know. I don't know what his stance was. I'm sure he was happy to get an influx of money from this move, but to then completely shut down any kind of challenging non-conference schedule because you're mopey about how much you had to travel last year to go play Rutgers and various other teams in the Big Ten, when that was a decision your university made, just feels childish, kind of cowardly. And look, I get it. If there's people who want to come after me for this and point out that, well, the Big Ten schedule is way harder than Gonzaga's in the WCC. Yeah, of course it is. I'm not denying that. We're not pretending that's not the case. We're not even going to pretend that Gonzaga's move to the Pac-12 is going to make their schedule comparable to a Big Ten schedule, because it's not. It won't be. But I still think it's really lame to play 10 of your 11 non-conference games in the state of California. I think it's really lame to play virtually nobody good. And when you do play them good, you're unwilling to play them anywhere other than your home court or the Intuit Dome just a few miles away. But I also bring this up not just to laugh at UCLA, although that's a big part of the reason we brought it up, but to point out that this is a trend that's probably going to continue. And there are teams that buck this trend. Not every team that plays in a tough conference like the SEC or the Big Ten or the Big 12 is only playing cupcakes in the non-conference. A lot of them are, more than I would like for them to. And I think it's a challenge that Gonzaga runs into. But I understand why they're not being punished for doing so. Like UCLA is going to play again. They'll play enough good games that, like, if they lose to Arizona, it's going to be a quad one loss. It's not going to be a big deal. And if they beat either Gonzaga or Arizona, that's a huge win for them. Cal and Arizona State Cal will be a neutral site game, so maybe that's quad two. Arizona State, we'll see. It's a home game, so it's probably quad two, maybe even quad three for UCLA. But they'll get so many quad one games out of Big Ten play that they'll have so many opportunities to be, still be a top 15, top 10 team in the net, even with a relatively non-competitive non-conference slate. So if you're not being punished for scheduling like this, you're going to keep scheduling like this. I think anytime a school like UCLA that was in the Champions Classic for a reason, because they've won more championships than any team in college basketball, not recently, mind you, but historically, they're a part of an event called the Champions Classic, and they bow out of it because they don't want to travel. This should be made fun of. Like, this is lame. This is something that should be made fun of for UCLA choosing to do this. It should also be viewed of like it's a little bit of a canary in the coal mine thing. I think we're past that point already, where we've already seen the damages that these bloated conferences and their bloated conference schedules have done. We've seen them with the near death of MTEs 2 years ago. The Maui Invitational class was so unbelievably loaded with Purdue and Gonzaga and UCLA and Syracuse and so many at Marquette and so many other great teams. And then this year, there's only two power conference teams. St. Mary's the best team in the Maui Invitational. That year, 2 years ago, when Gonzaga was in it, St. Mary's would have been like sixth. Like, it is a dramatic, devastating fall for these events like this, because you don't want to schedule 3 of your non-conference games in an MTE when you only have 11 of them. So you're seeing this move towards these really cupcakey non-conference schedules, where if the majority of the teams in your conference do it and they all beat the hell out of these bad mid-major schools at home, then it's going to boost their net rankings, and then they all start playing each other, and they all already have good net rankings. So now you have the 15th best team in the net playing the 25th best team in the net. Either way, somebody's getting a quad one win out of it, and everybody's happy, except for the teams like Gonzaga, who are trying to schedule competitive non-conference schedules and cannot do it because these teams do not want to play them. And again, I mention this because UCLA is on Gonzaga's schedule. I mention it because Gonzaga is the only team playing UCLA outside of the state of Washington, outside the state of California, until conference play begins. But also, there are other teams that are not doing this. Illinois, in the same conference as UCLA in the Big Ten, they're hosting Texas Tech, but they're also playing Alabama and Chicago. They're playing UConn in New York. They're playing Tennessee and Nashville. They're playing Mizzou in St. Louis. That's 3 SEC teams not at home. That's UConn in New York. That's Texas Tech. Yes, it's at home, but that's one of the top 5, top 10 best teams in college basketball. Even UW is playing at Baylor this year. They're playing at Washington State this year. They're playing either Nevada and either San Francisco or Colorado in California. It's not a great non-conference schedule for UW, but that's more challenging road games, more challenging non-games in Washington for UW than UCLA is willing to play. We'll have an update eventually on Gonzaga's non-conference schedule, although we already know how competitive it is compared to what UCLA is doing. But we'll have an update on that. We'll hopefully have some more updates on conference realignment, as we're hearing some rumors about that. The Pac-12's new media rights deal coming up as well. Hopefully, one of the next big updates we have is about the status of Tyon Grant-Foster for this upcoming season. We'll have all that and more coming up on a future episode of Locked On Zags. But that is going to wrap it up for me today here on the show. Folks, thank you so much for making the show your first listen or your first watch of the day. We'll be back later this week, but until then, as always, go Zags.